Again, Moses and Aaron stood before Pharaoh. The Lord had given him many chances to release his people, but Pharaoh's heart remained stubborn. Now Moses came with another warning: a terrible storm was about to strike Egypt. The Lord told Moses to go before Pharaoh once again and deliver his command. Pharaoh had seen the power of God, yet he still refused to listen. But the Lord would now show Egypt that his power was far greater than the power of its king. Moses warned Pharaoh that a terrible hailstorm was coming upon Egypt. It would be unlike anything the land had ever experienced. Yet even now, God gave the Egyptians an opportunity to listen and protect their servants and animals. The warning was clear. Anyone who feared the word of the Lord could bring their servants and animals into shelter. God was giving them a chance to escape the coming destruction. But those who refused would leave everything exposed to the storm. Some of Pharaoh's servants believed the warning. They had already witnessed the signs of God's power, and they did not want to take another chance. They hurried to bring their servants and animals inside before the storm arrived. But others ignored the warning. They left their servants and animals in the fields, refusing to believe that anything worse could happen. Across Egypt, people waited unknowingly beneath a sky that was already beginning to change. Then Moses stretched out his staff toward the heavens. The wind began to rise, and the sky grew darker. Across Egypt, people looked upward as the first signs of the coming storm appeared above them. Thunder rolled across the land, louder than anything the people had heard before. Lightning flashed through the dark clouds, and fear spread through the countryside. The storm was no longer approaching. It had begun. Then the hail came down with terrible force. Lightning flashed through the storm as enormous hailstones struck the land. Fields, trees, animals, and everything left outside were caught in the fury of the storm. The hail devastated the land of Egypt. Trees were shattered, crops were destroyed, and animals that had been left outside were struck down. The Egyptians watched helplessly as the storm tore through the land. But where the Israelites lived, there was no hail. While destruction covered Egypt, Goshen remained safe. The Israelites could see the storm raging around them, yet they knew that the Lord had protected them. At last, Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron. He admitted that he had sinned and that the Lord was just. He asked Moses to pray and make the terrible storm stop. For a moment, it seemed that Pharaoh might finally surrender. Moses left Pharaoh and went outside the city. He raised his hands toward the Lord and prayed. Moses knew that the storm would stop, not because Pharaoh had commanded it, but because the Lord alone had power over the heavens. Moses prayed, and the thunder stopped. The hail ceased, and the rain came to an end. The terrifying storm that had shaken Egypt suddenly became quiet. But the destruction it had caused remained across the land. When Pharaoh saw that the storm had stopped, his fear disappeared. Once again, he became stubborn and refused to let the Israelites go. The king had admitted his sin, but his heart had not truly changed. Once again, Moses and Aaron went before Pharaoh. The land was already devastated, yet Pharaoh still refused to release God's people. They stood before him with another message from the Lord. Moses asked Pharaoh how long he would continue to refuse to humble himself before the Lord. He warned him that the Israelites must be allowed to go and worship their God. But Pharaoh still would not surrender. Moses warned Pharaoh that locusts would soon cover the land. They would consume what remained of the crops after the terrible hail. Whatever Egypt had managed to save would soon be taken away. Even Pharaoh's own servants were becoming afraid. They had watched Egypt suffer again and again, and they knew the land was being destroyed. They pleaded with Pharaoh to stop resisting before Egypt was completely ruined. Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron back before him. He began to ask who exactly would go and worship the Lord. But his questions were not the words of a truly changed king. He was still looking for a way to control the Israelites. Moses made the answer clear. Everyone would go, the young and the old, sons and daughters. Their flocks and herds would go with them as well. God's people were not leaving Egypt in pieces. They were going together. Pharaoh refused. He would not allow the Israelites' children to leave with them. Once again, he tried to decide how God's people should worship. But Moses would not accept Pharaoh's conditions. Then Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt. A powerful east wind began to blow. Through the night, the wind swept across the land, carrying something terrible toward Egypt. By morning, the locusts had arrived. They came in an enormous swarm, covering the sky and descending upon Egypt. What had been left after the hail was now exposed to a second wave of destruction. The locusts covered the land until Egypt seemed to disappear beneath them. They consumed the plants and crops that remained. The fields that had once provided food for the people were being stripped bare. Pharaoh quickly called Moses and Aaron before him. Once again, he admitted that he had sinned against the Lord. He begged Moses to forgive him and to pray that this terrible plague would be taken away. Moses went out from Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord. He knew that the locusts would not disappear because of Pharaoh's command. Only God could remove the plague that had covered the land. The Lord sent a powerful wind from the west. It carried the locusts away from Egypt until not one remained in the land. Once again, Egypt was given relief. But the relief would not change Pharaoh's heart. When the locusts were gone, Pharaoh once again became stubborn. The moment of fear had passed, and his heart hardened again. He still refused to let God's people go. Then the Lord commanded Moses to stretch out his hand toward the heavens. Darkness began to spread across Egypt. Slowly, the light disappeared, and an unnatural darkness settled over the land. For 3 days, Egypt remained in deep darkness. People could not see one another, and many could not even move from where they were. The land that had once been filled with life was now swallowed by silence and fear.